Before we get into this, I should explain at least what I'm thinking when I use the word gimmick. See, a gimmick isn't so much an innovation or really a feature, it's kind of more of an accessory. Some sort of thing added to make you as the user more comfortable or have more fun or sort of add to the experience in some way. Obviously, there is overlap between features and innovation and gimmicks. Sometimes a feature can just be gimmicky. But yeah, it's just things that are a bit unnecessary. And in motorcycle history, there have been loads of ridiculous gimmicks, some as we'll see that still exist. But I'm sure there are some that I've missed, so be sure to let us know in the comments below if you think that there are any good ones that I've missed. And with that out of the way, let's jump into the 10 goofiest motorcycle gimmicks of all time. I feel like the ultimate gimmick that you can have on a motorcycle could be the cup holder, and for multiple reasons. Now, there are companies out there that offer cup holder sort of add-ons, like you can get one from a different company and add it to, say, your Harley or your Honda. But Harley actually does offer its own factory cup holder edition. It doesn't come on a motorcycle, but it is the right cup holder for that motorcycle, if that makes sense. I've looked around and I can't find any production motorcycles that have come with cup holders. As far as I know, the Goldwing never did, although you can get, additions to the Goldwing that add a cup holder. And I don't believe there are any Harleys that come as production bikes with cup holders. Again, this is as far as I know. I could be wrong. Let me know if you guys think I'm wrong here. But here's the problem with cup holders, and there's a few problems. First off, this can't be the kind of cup holder where you just throw your Dr. Pepper from McDonald's or, whatever, because it's just going to end up spilling all over the place when you're leaning your Goldwing over on its pegs. But also the shaking and bouncing is going to make that soda just go really flat really quick. But also, how are you supposed to take a drink when you're cruising down the road? Not only does it mean that you need to take one hand off of the handlebars, which does happen sometimes, obviously, you also have to figure out how to get that drink to your mouth while wearing your DOT certified full face helmet that I know you all wear. It just doesn't make sense on so many levels. Park the bike, get your drink your drink. Maybe you even stored your drink in a compartment on your bike or in a backpack or something, and then finish your drink and go ride the bike again. They just seem to be two separate things. This is the system that most people have, unless they have a backpack with water, sort of hooked up directly to them, or an IV or something. But this is what works, you stop the bike, you get a drink, and then you move on. You don't drink while you're riding your bike, and having a cup holder to me just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. All right, number 9 goes to a more tech-related feature. Obviously, there are loads of unnecessary pieces of tech on many modern motorcycles, but for me, there's really one that could easily be considered a gimmick and just totally useless in nature, and that goes to the R1's G-force calculator. That's right, this bike will tell you exactly how many G's you're pushing when you're riding your bike. This is like knowing how many knots you've traveled. It just has no bearing whatsoever on what you're doing. What are you supposed to do with this information? I get knowing your lean angle. You can see how all of the different maps that can be related to tracks are helpful. Obviously, knowing your revs or whatever, all of that makes sense. Even still, 0.01% of riders would need to know their lean angle, for example. But why do you need to know how many G's you're pushing? It just seems so silly. But, it's there. And it's cool, I guess, and maybe it helps sell bikes. I don't know. All right, this next one is one that I've wanted to talk about for so many videos, and it's never quite fit. Heck, even now, it doesn't really quite fit. But you know what? We're going to talk about it. What the heck even is this? It looks like a surprised cartoon character. Well, I'll tell you what it is. Bates was a company, and I believe they actually still exist, alongside quite a few other companies in the 70s, like Vetter, for example, that made big fairings that offered loads of wind protection before companies were really making their own fairings stock on motorcycles. So, the Goldwing is a good example. Think the kind of wind protection and comfort that came from later Goldwings. And this was before the Goldwing and other bikes started having those big fairings. Vetter and companies like Bates were making fairings for just sort of standard motorcycles to really turn them into touring bikes. But Bates did something different with the Bates Clipper. I guess you could call it a styling exercise, but it also is sort of a storage maximization tool, as well as apparently having a proven shape in the wind tunnel for better, gas mileage or something. The Bates Clipper fairing is perhaps the ugliest, gaudiest aftermarket motorcycle item ever, transforming your beautiful, sleek 1970s motorcycle into a goofy-looking, cartoonish version of itself. In many ways, the clipper fairing was predictive of the future of touring motorcycles. It came with loads of storage options, and it actually came with one hilarious, gimmicky feature that I'm actually going to give its own section. And that brings us to the elusive motorcycle cigarette lighter. Now, I scoured the internet for days trying to see if a motorcycle has ever come stock with a cigarette lighter or ashtray. Some say that Harley's Softail at one point came with an ashtray, but I really couldn't find any evidence of this. Again, if you guys know of a production motorcycle with some of these features, let me know. But for this, I'm looking again at the Bates Clipper fairing. I did find that that fairing came with an optional cigarette lighter. In this 1980 Cycle World issue, the Bates Clipper fairing is covered, and under Creature Comforts, we see that it has an optional cigarette lighter. Now, this is perhaps the silliest motorcycle gimmick that one could have, but of course, it was 1980. Helmets were still kind of an afterthought, even in the 1980s. And regardless, the idea of lighting your cigarette and smoking it while you cruise down the highway at 70 miles an hour, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Although I guess if you have all that wind protection, you're good. You can even light it and yeah, you're fine. I will say that a lighter does make more sense than an ashtray. Like, why would a motorcycle have an ashtray for you to use while riding? No sense at all. It is possible that some of these features are just there for when you're taking a break, having an easy place to light your cigarette, I guess. That's fine. But I think for me, it's the way that these extras, are seen and used to sell bikes as sort of similar extras that you have on a car, for example. And for me, that really misses the whole point of even riding a motorcycle. It's very different than a car, and it doesn't need to come with very many of the amenities that cars have. Some things make sense, but a lot of them do not. Number 6 on our list isn't so much a gimmick on a motorcycle as really the motorcycle itself is a gimmick. This is the Honda Motocompo, designed to basically be an accessory itself for subcompact cars, something you could fold up and throw in your trunk and pull out whenever you needed sort of a little scooter. And the Motocompo came out in 1981 and lasted until 1983. It did have decent production numbers, but I don't think it hit the numbers that Honda wanted. In many ways, this could be something that would work today as sort of an electric pocket scooter. But the thing was, this was a gas-powered little two-stroke. It's tough to sell a foldable gas-powered machine, even in the 1980s. But I will say the overall design is pretty unique and pretty cool, and because of this, there is a cult following for the Motocompo, but overall, the bike itself, even in its day, was somewhat of a gimmick and didn't really work. For number 5, let's look at keyless ignition. Now look, I hate this feature even on a car, where, it sort of makes sense, but on a motorcycle, come on. Like, why do you need this? Obviously, you'll still need the key on you, as you do with cars. Why not just have the key in the motorcycle traditionally, versus it being in your pocket or in some storage compartment? I guess it could be nice if you get all suited up with your gear and it's, in your pocket and you then don't have to dig it out. It just seems like such unnecessary tech, and that's the reason it's only really available on more expensive high-end bikes. Plus, cruisers often have this because, cruiser riders are inherently lazy, I guess. We all know this. But this hasn't made it to the middleweight, sort of average priced machine because it's totally unnecessary and useless to most riders. So yeah, keyless ignition, I don't like it on a car. I don't like it on a motorcycle. And for cars, I actually really like the feeling of just starting a car traditionally versus pressing a button. Obviously on motorcycles, we just press a button, but that's why I use a kickstart. All right, number 4 goes to a specific feature on a specific motorcycle, the PC800 and its silly trunk. Now, if you've seen Fortnine's video on this bike, you know that basically the whole goal was to make it as much like a car as possible, from the taillights to the overloaded plastics, but this one is just too much for me. Why do I need my motorcycle storage to open like a trunk? Are you really throwing in so many groceries that you need the thing to lift like a trunk? Am I wrong in saying that this entire motorcycle is kind of a gimmick in and of itself? It's got gimmicky lights that are made to look like car lights, the dash and all the plastics. It's just not good. But the trunk really is the cherry on top for me for gimmicky things. And this is why there really have been basically no other motorcycles to have a trunk like this, because it's just silly. All right, next up we have radios or stereos or just sound systems in general. From the Goldwing to Harley's big touring bikes to Indian's big bikes, I mean, it's pretty much a given. If your bike weighs like 950 pounds, it better have some sort of sound system on it. But then again, who listens to the radio anyways? And how can you hear it through your full face DOT approved helmet that you are wearing? Or maybe it's actually more about everyone else around you hearing that you're listening to it, kind of like subwoofers in a mid-2000s high schooler's car. Because that's the thing, motorcycle stereos and speakers are freaking loud. They have to be, especially when they're on big, loud motorcycles. So it's the pedestrians who are out trying to just enjoy their walk that are hearing this more than even the riders, unless the riders aren't wearing a helmet. I think that the idea sounds good, but I'm guessing for most riders who have had a bike that has a big sound system, I feel like most people don't use them, and if they could trade that extra weight, they would probably take that payoff versus having a radio or a stereo. But yeah, I feel like this one is just silly and doesn't really belong on motorcycles. Number 2 on our list goes to the optional snow skis that have been available for motorcycles, from this weird thing called the Cycle Snow Go to actual motorcycles like the Husqvarna 258 that came with built-in skis. Now, the whole idea of two-wheelers being taken out into the snow beyond maybe, what you would do on an adventure bike or just riding over light snow, it just doesn't really work for me. If you want to experience a snow sport where you're gliding on top of the snow, or you can actually go through deep snow and have your machine work well, why wouldn't you just get a snowmobile? Even four-wheelers and ATVs struggle in deep snow, so why do we think it'll work on a motorcycle? And that's why gimmicks like this have just really never taken off, because that's all they are, and most people, even from the very beginning, could see that it was just a gimmick. Now, last on our list goes to motorcycle airbags, something that has been present on the Honda Goldwing as an option all the way since 2006. Now, the Goldwing has been Honda's place for trying out all sorts of different tech and features, some things that people could even call gimmicks. But here's the thing, most of those things are actually pretty cool and useful, like the little pieces of plastic that could be turned in either direction to deflect wind off your legs or bring wind onto them, or things like armrests for the passenger. I was going to include armrests, but man, if you've ever ridden a Goldwing, those armrests are awesome. Or even, the Goldwing has an onboard air compressor, which is pretty cool and pretty simple, but man, airbags? I just don't understand this. How is this the tech that has stayed around on the Goldwing? I can think of so few scenarios where an airbag does anything good for you in the case of a motorcycle accident. The main problem in motorcycle accidents is rarely that you're slamming into your own motorcycle so hard. Obviously, that does happen, and it could happen, but usually, even if it does happen, it's what happens afterwards that is still going to be worse, like flying off of your motorcycle. And I just don't see how an airbag really helps you that much. It's more that you have no protection around you on a motorcycle, and that you'll be so easily thrown from the motorcycle. Now, you can make sense of airbags within your riding gear. Obviously, it helps MotoGP riders a ton. They're able to withstand insane high-speed crashes, often with very few severe injuries. But if it actually helped to have airbags on the motorcycle, wouldn't they have considered putting airbags on the motorcycles? Those motorcycles in MotoGP are obviously the peak of performance on two wheels, but they also are in many ways the peak of safety technology, and there's no airbags within the motorcycle. Unless that thing pops out the second it sees an oncoming car and literally creates like a puffy pillow around my body, and then when I go flying, that pillow stays with me and takes some of the impact, I just don't get the point. Because if someone is hitting you so hard that you're slamming into your own motorcycle, odds are you're also gonna go flying and slam into something else. But whatever, it's available, so people will buy it. All right, guys, those are my picks for the 10 silliest, dumbest motorcycle gimmicks of all time. What do you guys think? Do you have any that you've experienced or seen that should have made the list? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. If you liked the video, also, you could give it a like. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. Ride safe.